Right, let's get started. Minority in Parliament is demanding full publication of the Justice Brobe Commission report on the creation of new regions. A constitutional instrument to allow for the referendum on the new regions has been laid before Parliament, awaiting maturity. But Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu says members of Parliament do not have a copy of the report, and it will be out of place for the CI to get approved without MPs knowing the content of the Commission's report.
To conduct a surgical operation in the dark, because to understand and appreciate the constitutional instrument, the basis will be the report, the findings, and its content. Having no idea whatsoever what the constitutional instrument conforms in material respect to the recommendations of the Justice Brobe Commission report. That's why we are raising this, because there's a CI before Parliament. And those of you who understand the hierarchy of laws, when it's an LI, you relate it to the Parent Act. When it's an executive instrument, that is in the executive corridor. When it's a constitutional instrument, you relate it to the Constitution, but in this matter specifically to the Justice Brobe Commission report. We recall that President Nana Addo appointed a Commission of Inquiry under Article 5 of the 1992 Constitution of Ghana to inquire into the demand for the creation of new regions and to make recommendations on all the factors involved in the creation or alteration of a region or the merger of regions. Indeed, Article 5.4 of the Constitution provides that where the Commission of Inquiry finds that there is a need and a substantial demand for the creation, alteration, or merger, it shall recommend to the President that a referendum be held, specifying the issues to be determined by the referendum and the places where the referendum shall be held. So even to know the places, we need to know what the Commission of Inquiry and the good people of Ghana, in the interest of openness and transparency, need to know. We demand transparency and we demand that the report be published. It is in the interest of good governance, openness, truthfulness, and transparency that the report of the Commission of Inquiry is made public, to enable the nation verify that the constitutional instrument before Parliament is truly reflective of the contents of the Commission's report and its recommendation. It is the right thing to do, and we urge President Nana Addo to keep faith with his promise for a transparent and accountable governance. Making the Justice Brobe Commission report public will be an important benchmark on which similar matters will be modeled in future for the constitutional development of our country. Again, making public the Justice Brobe report will help shed light on the scope of the proposed referendum. What is the scope? Where does it cover? From which boundary to what boundary? The issues have been debated vigorously in the public domain. As to who is entitled to vote, we need to know. What name to give to a region, we need to know. There should be nothing secret about a report of this nature, and we demand full disclosure in the public interest. In any case, the Commission is held public sittings.
I also remain in Parliament, and Trade and Industry Minister Alan Tremanting says 79 projects under the One District, One Factory initiative are currently at various levels of completion. Responding to questions on the floor on progress of work on the program, Mr. Alan Tremanting said while some of the factories are under construction, funding approval has now been given to others. However, the minority says government has so far failed to deliver on its promises on the deadline for the establishment of these factories. Our parliamentary correspondent Joseph Opoku-Gakpo has more.
The Minister for Trade and Industry, Mr. Alan Tremanting, told Parliament that out of the 79 factories expected to come on stream, about 22 of them will be right here in the Greater Accra region, and we would also have the Ashanti region and the Bono Ahafo region, each having 13 factories. He says there are additional funds coming all the way from China in order to help ensure more of such factories are built.
Some of these 79 projects indicated in the table above have commenced operations. Others are under construction, whilst others have received approval from the participating financial institutions and are ready to commence implementation.
But minority MPs raised concerns that previous timelines that had been given by the NPP, including timelines spelled out in their own manifesto, had not been adhered to, and they demanded answers from the minister.
During the vetting of the Honorable Minister, I was present, and he made a categorical statement that these factories that were to be built from scratch would be on stream within 1 year to 2 years.
It is unlikely that with my modest experience in the private sector and in industry, that I would have given an indication that within 1 year or 2 years, all the 216 factories would have been completed.
Some MPs are however raising issues with how come government is not focusing on reviving collapsed factories, and it's just focused on bringing in new factories. Angelo Foruate is a member of the Employment Committee of Parliament.
We have old or existing factories that collapsed years back. So instead of putting all the energy in this campaign message, 1D, 1F, why don't we revamp or invest in revamping these new factories or bringing them back to work? Is it not also easier in terms of investment to use existing structures that we have, especially maybe with a new investor, you now have to do build a house or a factory house, you have to build a warehouse or something. We should rather invest in the old ones so that we can start from somewhere. And so my suggestion is that the Polugu factory is there, the Japon testers is there, we need rice, so much rice in this country, Aveime is there, others are scattered all over. The sugar factory that they are talking about is there. They should just go and do something so that these factories, people will start working there.
Now for the latest from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, where labor unions have described as unlawful and undemocratic government's demand for them to change their representatives on the yet-to-be-constituted University Council. Executive members of UTAG, or Trea Mensa, said that it is against the Act and statutes establishing the university and will set a bad precedent if allowed. Mr. Adai Mensah is also appealing to well-meaning bodies such as the Peace Council and the clergy associations to intervene, as he describes their silence as deafening. Here's what he said to Love News' Kwesi Deborah.
I think that where we are is a very crucial moment. And we want to ask the Peace Council, Khalid Bishop Conference, the Chief Imam, and all other well-meaning Ghanaians to speak on this matter, because the constitutional rights of the respective unions in our universities, Kenya University, has been breached. And we don't want things to degenerate to a point where it cannot be salvaged. So this is the time. If they have anything to say or any intervention, this is it. This stalemate to occur, and our children, our nephews, our nieces to be staying home in a very important university like this with international students, everything grinding to a halt, and such key stakeholders are in this country and they are not talking, I think their silence is deafening. So we are calling them not to speak if they really mean well.
Well, so we have to move on. An association of teacher trainees on Wednesday took to the streets to protest a directive by the Ghana Education Service that they undergo mandatory national service. And the directive, which takes effect from this year, will mean that teacher trainees will now be employed by government only after they have served a one-year mandatory national service. The trainees, however, say this is unfair, especially because government has been unable so far to assign any justification for the change in policy. Well, we have my colleague Nancy Emefa Jiradosi joining the protesters and bringing us the latest reports.
The trainees converged at the Obra spot near the Kwame Nkrumah interchange in the morning, holding placards with inscriptions such as Post Us Now and Our Parents Are Crying, among others. They say they could not fathom why they are being made to undergo compulsory national service.
Government is frustrating our proceedings. Teacher trainees, the government is frustrating our proceedings. In the first place, we know the normal thing that we used to do is that when we are done, we get posted by GS into the various business school automatically. All of a sudden, on the 25th of October last month, you brought another directive that we should register with national service personnel. They are imposing policies on us. We see that they are imposing policies on us, and it is unfair on the part of the government to do that to us.
As they moved through the streets of Adabraka towards the Heart of Oak Park, they were joined by another set of trainees from the Brongahafo and Ashanti regions. The protesters were upset when at the Accra Heart of Oak Park, they were told they could not go to the office of the Vice President as they expected. The police would, however, not budge. An offer by the police to bring in an official from the Education Ministry to meet the protesters was also rejected. The trainees explained their last meeting with the Education Minister did not go too well.
The Minister for Education, Dr. Matthew Prokupembre, did not respect the nearly 20 teachers, most especially their leaders. In a meeting with him, myself, I was part of that meeting, and the way I was treated and other friends or other colleagues were treated is very sad and it's very bad. In fact, at a point in time, he has to ask you to leave a meeting if you realize that you have a point, you have something to say for nearly 20 teachers, so he realized he's against what he wants or he is not in support of it.
Eventually, though, the police arrived with the Deputy Education Minister, Yao Educhum, whose welcome was not favorable. But they finally delivered their petition to the Deputy Minister. Dr. Duchum later addressed the media and assured them the petition will be delivered to the right authority.
The petition will be delivered to the intended recipients immediately.
Okay, which is your ministry, who is in charge of all of this?
No, they said the Vice President.
TTAG has meanwhile vowed to hold series of protests till the policy is revered.
Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, says that it's probing the online gold trading scheme recently introduced by gold dealership Men's Gold. SEC wants potential investors to be cautious about placing their money in the scheme without a clear understanding of what it entails. Men's Gold on Monday announced its global market platform, which they explain will ensure smooth payment of dividends. Addressing a news conference on Wednesday, head of legal and enforcement at SEC, Kalis Ni Oman Badu, said that investigations are already underway to understand the platform.
From Men's Gold on any pleading for leniency. And we've also heard or picked signals in the public on the issue about online business. We are monitoring. As long as it offends our legal or regulatory regime, we will come into play. I hope you understand. Yes, as long as that platform falls within the regulatory regime of the SEC would act. But for now, we have not received any official correspondence from them on pleading for leniency or the BOG coming down, lightly on them. When we receive those communications, they know what to do. They have lawyers. Their lawyers can advise them. If there's a case in court and you want to settle, there's a process within the court rules. And we are amenable. We want to develop the market. And we are not out. For now, it is very limited information that they've launched an online platform. So when such information comes, we have an investigation team. We will investigate if there's actually a platform like that. And then we'll look at the features of the platform. Once it falls within an activity that must be regulated within Act 929, the SEC will advise itself. And Ghanaians must know something. The SEC, if you go and do a business with a fund manager or an unlicensed market operator, and there are problems, it is very difficult for the regulator to fight that person on your behalf, because you would have had a contractual relationship with that person. And if we are not a party to the transaction, it becomes difficult. So if it is true that an online platform has been launched, the public should know that you would need to be sure of what we are doing. And that's part of the reasons why we are having this discussion. We have to be sure of the transactions we engage in. We got the information, I think 2 or 3 days ago, about the launch of an online platform. We will put it through the process, and then once we capture all the elements, if we feel that it has issues with the provisions that our regulations have, we would again trigger our regime, and then if there's a need to regulate, license, we will issue out the orders. If it doesn't fall within our regime, we would not say anything.
Well, that's a new way Men's Gold wants to go. The global trading platform that it says it will finally outdoor, but ultimately we know that there are a number of initiatives that have also been started online, but I don't know how the SEC should regulate this.
Yes,
they should have some guidelines.
They ought to have guidelines already, but it appears they don't quite know the nature of the business that Men's Gold seeks to operate, and so they want to investigate that first. In the meantime, though, they are issuing warnings, and it's interesting, these warnings of themselves have an impact on the reputation of a business. So we should be asking our regulators whether they ought to be issuing warnings about people's businesses when they don't yet know enough about them. But the public have been warned, so that if they do decide to take part in this business, then it would be following a warning from the regulator.
Yeah, at their own risk or peril, so to speak. But look, we'll be looking at these and other stories as we do a review of the newspapers, and that will be up next. Please remember, we'll also look at some international online portals, but of course, we would have looked at myjoyonline.com. Stay with us.